Hi, my name is Ozzie Jurock. I have the privilege to be the host of OZZIE'S, and today it is an honor to speak to Dustan Woodhouse. Dustan is a consultant for mortgage architects, and of course he's been reinventing himself in the last 2 years from being an absolute ace mortgage broker. I don't know how many you were in Canada, but right up there, and to now into coaching and all sorts of wonderful things. I look forward to it. Welcome, Dustan.
Well, thank you, Ozzie. It's an honor to be chatting with you. I know I'm going to learn a few things here.
Well, so tell me a little bit about your road. I know that you have a strong personal view about having goals, both for your body and for your mind.
Yeah, well, hey, one of my favorite quotes is one of yours. If you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live? Yeah. Right? I love that one. Yeah, I think I first heard you say that 10 years ago now. But I've repeated it dozens of times to people. Yeah, I've certainly always tried to take good care of myself. But yeah, I mean, reinvention almost seems to be my thing. It's not that I'm constantly seeing something shiny and chasing after it. I spent the better part of 10 years in the automotive aftermarket parts business, running a mail order parts business. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, if you saw a German car with big wheels and a loud exhaust, that was my fault. Largely, that was my fault. And the currencies, but in Europe, the consolidation of the currencies into the euro drove our costs up. The swing back in 03, 04 with the US-Canadian exchange rate just gutted our revenues. And so I found myself twiddling my thumbs from about 05 through 07. And through that 3-year period or so, I had multiple people literally shake their finger in my face saying, you should be a mortgage broker. And admittedly, when I was, I think, 24, I did buy a book called Making Money from Your Mortgage. Listeners, do not pick that book up now. It's completely out of date. But, I was negotiating with the bank, and I thought I should read up. And how many 24-year-olds read a 200-page book on mortgages? Yeah. Not that many, but I didn't see that as a signpost on the highway of life. Yeah. So I stayed in the automotive parts business. And finally, in late 07, I realized, reinvention was necessary. At that point, the amount of personal debt I was carrying, the life situation that my wife and I found ourselves in, like something needed to change drastically and quickly. So I thought, as many people do, well, hey, I'll just jump into mortgage brokering and that'll fix everything. And of course, I didn't study up, and as it turns out, now I'm aware, acutely aware, the attrition rate in BC is 85%.
Wow.
85 out of 100 graduates graduating from the mortgage brokering course today, 2 years from now, will not be renewing their license. And those remaining 15%, 1% are doing well. It's a very, very difficult business.
And why is that? Is it effort, work?
Yeah, here's one of my favorite things to say when I'm hosting a workshop, which is now what I do a lot of. So I spent 11 years brokering. I jumped in with both feet, or as I say, jumped off the cliff and figured out how to build my parachute on the way down. And I did the work. I mean, I showed up at every single real estate related event there was in the city of Vancouver. And in fact, that's how you and I met.
That's right, yeah.
I went to one of your events, and it was the Money Talks event, Michael Campbell's event, where I saw you walking through the lobby, and I just heard you speak, and I thought, what have I got to lose here? And on the way down, you know what, I've forgotten about this until just now. On the way down to that event, I phoned, I won't say who it was, we'll just call him a friend of mine. I phoned a friend of mine. I said, hey, I'm going to this Money Talks event. I'm going to hear Ozzie Jurock speak. And he says, what are you going to that for? Yeah. And this is a person who also was a brand new mortgage broker, but didn't see the value that I saw in showing up at all these events. And he laughs at me and he says to me, what are you going to do? Get Ozzie's mortgage application? And I said, well, you know what? Challenge accepted, all right? I mean, I didn't get your mortgage application, but it was interesting because it was his voice, sort of mocking me for going to this event and like, what are you really going to get out of it?
Right.
In the back of my mind, as I saw you walking alone, a cup of coffee in your hand across the lobby, and I thought, I'll just stop and introduce myself. And I said, I really appreciated your talk. It was positive. and optimistic, which, in the spring of 2009, or no, it was, pardon me, it would have been 09. I think it was 09. Spring of 2009, optimism in the real estate market, that was a rare commodity.
That's right, the economic crisis.
The world was ending. I mean, what most people forget, especially if you weren't in Vancouver, is January of 2009, we had a full foot of snow on the ground the entire month. It didn't matter what else was happening in the world. No one was going to buy or sell real estate because no one in Vancouver has a snow shovel, snow boots, snow tires. The market literally froze, right? So it's kind of interesting when you look at the numbers, how everyone assumes it's economic crisis. We had a weather crisis that impacted that spring market. But anyway, as I say, I introduced myself to you, and you were very quick to, long handshake hung onto my hand. I still remember it, and you saying, hey, we've got this real estate organization, the Real Estate Action Group. We should have a conversation. You should come out to one of our events. Come be my guest. And over to your booth we went, and of course I did come to that event, signed up, and never looked back. And actually, this is going to sound like the Aussie Love Fest a little bit, but another pivotal moment. And again, I've talked about this with, last year I had just under 1,600 mortgage agents across Canada sit in my workshops.
1,600?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because this is how you reinvented yourself, from being the broker that worked 12 hours a day. Yeah. Now you're working with 1,600 agents and teaching them.
12 hours a day might have been a light day for a while there. I mean, as I say, I jumped in with both feet, and I spent about 11 years. Well, we processed 1,691 mortgages. Our peak year was 237 files, and that's myself with one dedicated, amazing associate. And that's in an industry where the average, the median, is 24 files. So but the amazing thing is, in order to do that, you can't do that in an 8-hour day. You always maintained. You want to have the high earnings. You want to be that special broker that's very successful. You have to put in the hours. Well, and I'd say to the listeners who are thinking about putting in hours, peak performance, income levels, these types of things. What I've learned, again, from having conversations now with hundreds of top performers in the mortgage industry in particular, not one of them, including myself, did it in pursuit of money.
Right.
Absolutely, we pursued the first, let's call it 120, we're in Vancouver, let's call it $160,000 a year. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, we absolutely grounded out to meet Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We had to make sure that the bills were paid and we were getting ahead of the curve a little bit. However, the extra hundreds of thousands of dollars above Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that, as I say, if you want to call it roughly $160,000 a year, which incidentally, I guess not coincidentally, that was my target income back in 2009, my first full year.
That's pretty good for 2009.
Yeah, well, and it was math, right? I realized I'm going to earn approximately $2,000 per transaction. That means I need to process 80 files, as I mentioned, in an industry where the median broker is processing 24. How many leads do I need to generate 80 completed files, and what months are going to be, June is going to be a busier month than February. So I set expectations accordingly. I mapped out the year as for how many files per month I would close. And then I pursued activities that would generate those conversations. I don't like to call them leads. I like to call them opportunities or conversations.
Which makes a lot of sense.
And so, as I say, it really came down to taking action to generate those conversations. And again, there's no better example I can think of with being sort of challenged than you challenging me one night. I was sitting in the front row of one of your events, and this is like a beneficial story from a few different angles for listeners. So if you are the designated individual who is going to speak to a group of people on a regular basis, you better make sure you're on time every single time.
Yeah.
Because the one time you're late is the one time somebody else might wedge their way in there, and that is the case. So the designated speaker on the mortgage topic that night was a few minutes late. You were on the mic. I'd made a point of introducing myself to you, as we touched on. You knew who I was, and this was probably the 4th or 5th meeting I'd been to. I'd handed out virtually no business cards in the previous 4 or 5 meetings. Lucky to have one conversation per meeting, one-to-one. And I'm sitting in the front row, which is another trait that I suggest to everyone. If you're trying to position yourself, front row. And also, by the way, it's a lot harder to fall asleep in the front row.
You've got to stay awake.
That's right. So if you're somebody who likes to nod off in these things, you sit in the front row, you stay awake. So you looked at me and you said, Dustan, you're a mortgage expert. Come up here and give us an update.
Yeah.
And that's that pivotal moment where a lot of people, they look around the room, there are 150 to 200 people in that room, and they think one of two things. They think, I'm not a public speaker, I'm not prepared, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't get up there, oh my gosh, everyone will laugh at me, or they'll throw things at me. There's that whole mindset. Or there's the, hell yeah,
let's go.
I'll figure it out while my mouth is flapping.
Sure.
And I actually think I had both trains of thought running full steam ahead in my mind, but I just, like an out-of-body experience. I got out of the chair and I went up and I grabbed the microphone. And again, one of the key things, if you're going to pursue any kind of new venture, learn your business. So I had been studying up on all kinds of arcane mortgage bits of information, especially as pertained to investment properties, which was who that group largely was. That audience was primarily interested in investment in real estate. And I just threw a quick little blurb out there on one of the lenders that changed a policy around rental offset versus rental add back.
Right.
I'll let your listeners Google rental offset. In fact, don't bother Googling it. Just call your mortgage broker and let them understand.
And if he doesn't know, get another mortgage broker.
That's right, exactly.
But I mean, it's so true that we have to lift ourselves out of the crowd, and we are sometimes worried about speaking. But if you have an understanding of your business, who better than talk about it, right? Because in the end, you stand in front of the stage, everybody's a little nervous, but then if you talk about what you do every single day, that's what people want to hear, and they want you to be natural, right? They don't want you to be sort of stilted or say somebody else. They want to see who you are, and I think your stage presence is second to none.
But it was a complete fluke. I mean, thank you for that compliment, but I don't know where that came from. I'd never gone to a Toastmasters meeting. I subsequently went to a Toastmasters meeting, and I thought, I'm never coming to one of these again. All these people are so nervous. I'm going to wind up nervous. Do they know something I don't know? I mean, the only thing I'd ever spoken at was my sister's wedding. That's a pretty warm crowd, right? It's family.
But you're talking about your business. Yes. And by that time, you were also passionate about it. You started to have some goals, and you saw the potential in terms of income. What I always enjoyed about you, that you also matched, you did not take the nonsense about you can do it all in 8 hours, right? You had to put in those extra hours to have extraordinary earnings.
There's no two ways about it, I mean, Malcolm Gladwell popularized, it was a Harvard professor's theory, I've forgotten his name, as most of us have now. We all associate Malcolm Gladwell with the 10,000 hour rule. Yeah. That was actually a Harvard study that was done. And 10,000 hours of dedicated practice is important. And if you're working 80-hour work weeks, your 10,000 hours are under your belt in about 2.5 years. So you can jump into a brand new profession, and you really can become an expert inside of 3 years if you have the support that I had. Right? So when I give these presentations talking about my success that I managed to achieve in the brokering world, I have a slide that says my unique life. Mm-hmm. Now look, I mean, my parents are married. My wife's parents are still married. My kids stayed out of prison. There were of course some health events and some different things, a flat tire, a car accident, whatever. But there were no major upsets. Mm-hmm. And so, for people who have major challenges, they're a single parent with 3 children full time that they're juggling. It's a lot more difficult to find those 80 hours. But I credit the support of my family immensely. That played a huge role in my ability to do what I did.
But you also felt that you had to have a body that was capable of doing it. So you believe in exercise?
Yeah, that was a no compromise, and to this day remains a no compromise. I mean, I'm 47 years old, and one of the things I've adopted, so I've always gone to the gym, although it's a bit of a joke because I am a skinny guy naturally. And I ran into my friend and I have been working out together for 20 years or so. It was about 10 years ago. We're walking out of the gym around February of the year, and an old high school friend who knew both of us, we hadn't seen him in 10 years, he's walking into the gym, and he's big, jacked, muscle guy. And he says, "Oh, wow, congrats, you guys finally decided to join the gym, bulk up." And my buddy and I looked at each other, it's like, man, we've been going to the gym 5 days a week for like 20 years. Like, you know, so yeah, but you know, I think it's very important to have some kind of daily physical exercise. And you know, rest days matter, but to me a rest day is the day that you go to a Bikram yoga class, or you go for a 30-minute walk or something. You got to be moving. One of my favorite lines about physical health, the best position for your body. People talk about these, you know, should I sit down at my desk, stand up desks, what's it going to be? The best position for your body is the next position. I love that quote.
Right.
Right.
Well, the thing is, you know, if you, I mean, 80 hours a week is double what sort of most people consider to be normal. Well, if you want to have the shape and the energy, you've got to also do something with your body, no question about it. And you love biking, and on the weekends you're out hiking and biking. I live vicariously through you on Facebook, because while I admire, I do not duplicate your events. I'm very happy for you to do all of these wonderful things.
Well, yeah, hey, I've been lucky enough to hang on to a dirt bike or a downhill mountain bike just about every weekend for the better part of 25 years. And then there's a camaraderie there too. I'm riding a lot of times with the same guys. For
I noticed you had one of those
decades.
helmet cams on, and you know, it's like talk about vicariously. Holy mackerel! That's one thing I will never do is go down those alleys. But the thing is now you're 11 years as a mortgage broker, and you became one of Canada's leading mortgage brokers. No question about it. You also had an educational side to you. I always felt that if you asked a question, you take the time to understand it from the listener and his or her particular intelligence level, and then you match that and you take the time to educate them. And so I guess after about 11 years, those 80 hours and repetitive kind of business wasn't challenging enough.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, my wife at the time, I think it was April of 2017, and I received this award that I don't even think I've mentioned it previously. I don't talk about it a whole lot, but it was Broker of the Year.
Right.
And so.
And that's a big corporation to be Broker of the Year in.
Well, actually, that wasn't even the corporate one. That was like the National Association. So it was out of 18,000 brokers. Somehow somebody nominated
Numero
me.
uno.
It was kind of neat. I got nominated the year before, and I didn't win it. And you know, you don't care about awards until you care about awards.
Oh, absolutely.
So I didn't care, and then I got nominated, and it's like, I don't care, and then I lost, and I kind of care. And then I got nominated the next year, and it was really interesting because I was actually down at a U.S. mortgage conference the night of the awards, and I couldn't make the flights work in the time zones, so I couldn't get to Toronto that night. So I was sitting literally with about 800 top U.S. mortgage brokers. None of them know who I am. There's myself and one other Canadian at this event, and I win Broker of the Year, and nobody cared. Like nobody knew. It was a non-issue, right? So it was very good for the ego to keep it in check, because really, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But at that point, my wife, she made the comment, Carrie, she said to a friend of hers, she said, well, I guess that's going to be for him in brokering.
You achieved the pinnacle. What else is left?
Yeah, and I said, that's ridiculous. And she says, really? She's like, you've written 3 books on brokering. You're starting to do these workshops. She's like, I can see it. You can't see it. And I said, okay, I guess I see and so that's what happened, really, literally almost the timing of that award and the shift away from full-time brokering, which I say you either do it full-time or you don't do it at all. So really the shift away from brokering to the workshops, it was a hard cutoff in May of 2017, and I went deep into the workshops, coaching, one-on-one training, mastermind meetings, and did a variety of different things, and it provided a fantastic opportunity for a year and a half traveling back and forth across the country and just learning about all these different markets and different
Well, also
mindsets.
by writing those books, the questions you got, and you became quite popular with other mortgage brokers. Hey, whoever you are, you're the broker of the year. What do you do that I can learn and be better at? And maybe some of them didn't want to hear you have to work or you have to be full-time. But the reality was that you saw a niche. It was needed to have this hands-on kind of training.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the number one challenge with getting someone truly qualified and enthusiastic to train mortgage brokers is that if you understand everything there is about the role, you can make a significant amount of money doing the job. There is not a significant amount of money to be made in teaching others how to do the job. And I've realized, you know, I can take somebody who's closing 50 files a year to 100 files a year quite easily. Like that, they've got something already ingrained in them. Call it a work ethic, whatever it is, but they've got that thing that we can help amplify a few things on, organize and streamline, and we can double their volume. But to get somebody from, say, 5 or 10 files a year to 50 files a year is a Herculean task, and it's a lot more challenging. It really is. But you know, you love action. I know that's your mantra, Ozzie, is always action, right? Take action. And so I think you'll appreciate what I'll say here on the topic of, I don't care whether you're a mortgage broker, a realtor, an insurance agent, selling vacuum cleaners door to door, whatever it is. If we went out right now, we're on Burrard Street here in Vancouver, beautiful-ish day. If we walked outside and grabbed whoever off the street and said, hey, so picture a 25-year-old youth, you know, backpack and a toucan, and hey, how would you like to earn $250,000 in the next 12 months?
Right.
Pretty much 99% of them will say, yeah, I'm interested.
Sure.
Tell me more. And then they probably pause and say, wait a minute, like, do I need to go into a work camp? Could I be poisoned? Am I going to lose a limb? Is it dangerous?
Am I a test subject?
Yeah. Is it going to be weird? Like, no. Here's you only just have to do one thing, really. Well, a few things, but the most challenging thing. So you do need to understand the business. You have to have a bit of a passion for what you're doing. Of course, these things are important. But here's where the rubber hits the road. You need to pick up the phone and make 10 phone calls a day.
Just 10.
Just 10. 10 will get you there.
Yeah.
I mean, 20, 30, 40, 50. I had one gentleman in Toronto, that man hit a breaking point in his life, and he committed to 80 phone calls a day.
Wow.
80 outbound calls, and there's no shortage of people to call. And of course, you know, this is what I say to these audiences. I'm like, so there it is, $250,000 a year. It's at your fingertips. You need to make 10 phone calls a day, 10 outbound calls, ideally to realtors, accountants, financial planners, people who have the trust or the business that you need to be referred.
Right.
And if you make those calls relentlessly, you will achieve that goal. Nah, man, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And I say to the audience, like, that's what a whole bunch of you are saying. You're licensed, you've got the knowledge.
All right.
The only thing between you and success is 10 outbound calls a day, and a whole bunch of them will not make those calls. They won't.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I was a branch manager for realtors. I ran a large real estate company with agents, and we've continuously tried to motivate them or find out what it was. And in the end, it always comes down to that. I just don't like this cold calling. We used to call it gold calling, or anything else you put a dollar number on it. And in the end, it was always true. You had to do something on a regular basis. I like Kevin O'Leary, who wrote in one of his books when he was asked, how did you raise $128 million? He said, I picked up the phone. And then he repeated, picked the phone, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do it. We want to all do it through social media, but really we have to have the eyeball to eyeball, voice to voice contact.
I sum it up as simply as this. If your phone is not ringing, you need to make other people's phones ring. It's that
Very
simple.
Yeah.
You should have that phone off its cradle. Now, okay, I dated myself. What's a cradle? But you should have that phone to your ear, right? I mean, that you should. If it's not ringing, Somebody else's phone better be ringing.
So this teaching got you a lot of exposure in Ontario. You fly there quite a bit. Is that where you do most of the training?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of that novelty factor too. I mean, I know a great deal of very successful brokers in BC, and I think maybe overexposure. I mean, I certainly cut my teeth speaking at every single possible event I could get a chance to speak at locally, because obviously there's no travel, it's easy. So people have heard a lot from me locally. Whereas Toronto, I mean, you do have triple the population and you've got triple the broker population. And in Toronto, the attrition rate is 97.5.
Oh, gee,
so there's a constant stream of new brokers coming into the space. And it led me to spend a good 10 days a month in Toronto over the past year, really.
Well, I think with you, it's not just the teaching of the actual business, but I mean, you have a great website and you have great posts. I know that, some of the, should you be locking in or have a variable rate, for instance, everybody should go to your website and listen to these posts. Subject-free offers are risky, clarity versus on portability, the assessment, what does it mean? Does it really mean property value and so on? But like maybe how about the variable rate versus fixed rate? You have a specific view on that. Yeah,
I certainly do, and it's born out of personal experience. As there's that Vimeo video. If you Google Dustan Woodhouse fixed versus variable, you get the 8-minute long version. But in a nutshell, what most people are unaware of, because the banks don't volunteer this information up front, is that the penalties can be 900% higher in a fixed rate mortgage. And of course, I would say to my clients on the opening phone call all the time, I would say, look, 6 out of 10 Canadians break their mortgages early. I know you're not going to, but if you stand at the door to my office building here, so the building my office is located in, it's one of the major real estate conveyance firms. I said, you stand at the door and stop the next 10 people who've just signed the documents on their house and ask them, any chance you're going to break your mortgage? 10 out of 10 will say, no way, not me, and 6 of them are wrong. Mm-hmm. The real stats right now, just recently from one of the main lenders, 65% of mortgages are broken at an average of 33 months. I mean, I don't obviously use this language with clients, but hey, we're on more of a broader audience, so I can speak a little more generally. But the reality is 96% of businesses fail inside 10 years. 60% of marriages break down inside 10 years. So if you've got 2 self-employed newlyweds sitting across from you, the odds are
break the mortgage.
Yeah, the odds are stacked against them. I mean, they're breaking that mortgage whether they believe it or not. And
well, most people think it's just a 3 months penalty and that's it.
And that's not the case. I mean, the all-time highest penalty we've seen was 11% of the balance. It was a $1 million mortgage with a $110,000 break penalty.
And that's sort of the interest rate that was written versus the interest rates that the bank says they now have to reinvest it at, and you have to pay the difference.
Well, it's a little more arcane of a formula than that even. Yeah. It's actually pretend interest rates.
Yeah.
Like they're using these interest rates in the calculation that they would never actually lend the money out at. So they're artificially reduced and artificially inflated rates that juice the penalty significantly. Now, there are lenders in Canada that do just compare your rate with the market rate, and the penalties run closer to 1% of the balance as opposed to 4.5% of the balance, which is the norm in a fixed rate. And the number one reason I'm a fan of variable rate mortgages is, aside from the fact that it's been the winning move interest expense-wise for 50 years running, is, remember, 2/3 of the people who take a mortgage, they're never going to complete the term. So really, we're only talking about 33 months. We're not talking about 5 years. And when they break it, the penalty is just 3 months interest in a variable rate mortgage. In 90% of variable rate mortgages, there are some unique credit unions and whatnot that have a little bit different interest rate penalties. But the majority of lenders in Canada, it's 3 months interest. So it's about 0.5% of the balance.
Certainly, I would, any listener that has a specific interest, make sure that they Google Dustan Woodhouse, go to his website and take a look at not just that particular podcast, or it's not a podcast, it's a Vimeo video, so they see you in action live, because it certainly is a very interesting point of view on that particular question. Now, you're not just being a mortgage broker, you also then went into the investment area of the real estate world. You bought real estate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I eat my own cooking.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's very important. I mean, with all the brokers I worked with, I had a checklist of, if you are going to work with clients, you yourself should be eating your own cooking. So have you got your will in place? Have you got life insurance, disability, critical illness? Are you incorporated? Have you set up your investments through a holdco? What are you investing in?
Right.
I really believe that, again, we should be leading by example wherever possible. And yeah, so I've had investment properties. My wife and I purchased investment properties as far back as 1995, I think was the first one we purchased. We bought a pre-sale on a loft in Gastown at Carroll and Cordova. $95,000 for a 580 square foot loft. And boy, we sold that property in 2003 when we had a little bit of a personal economic challenge we were going through before I got into brokering. We sold that property for $180,000. Thought we were geniuses.
Died and gone to heaven.
Yeah. Phenomenal investment, and it was positive cash flow all the way through. We had this huge lift, fantastic. And we had 3 other properties as well at the time, which we also sold, and thus formed the mantra that I've repeated to clients forever: refi and buy.
Yeah.
Don't sell anything. Refinance what you have, take that equity, buy another one. Yeah. Refi and buy.
You never regret the properties you buy, but you regret every single one you sell.
That's
and that's very true in my life. I've often, when I look sort of back, buying and selling, you always can say, well, I shouldn't have sold it, but I made a profit. But in reality, if I kept everything, would have been better off.
Yeah. And here's the other thing: nobody buys or sells on logic. No one. Oh, interest rates this, market that. No, this is all nonsense. We do everything we do on emotion, and we justify it. We try and rationalize it, but it's all emotion. I look back, we could have made it through the period we were going through without having sold those properties. We absolutely could have, but emotion ruled the day, and we felt like we needed to circle the wagons, and that's what we did.
Well, and there's also times, when I look back, I just talked to the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board yesterday, and that question came up, is now the time that it's over, right? I've always been told it's over this year, right? I mean, it was over in 1987, and the Russian crisis, and Asian crisis, and Mexican crisis. And in the end, had you just bought something, anything, in the middle of all of these crises, you would have outperformed certainly the stock market, any other investment you could have had, because of the leverage, and because in many cases the tenant paying it off. And if nothing else, you created the mortgage reduction by making the payments to yourself, right? So there's no question that real estate timing is important, but its action is even more important.
Well, I would say action outweighs timing, because timing, it's irrelevant. It's short-term pain in some cases. I mean, imagine if you'd bought in the peak year when we had a 39% increase year over year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many people who they are really glad they did not buy in that year. And that year, of course, I'm speaking of is 1989.
Yeah.
Because, of course, prices have never risen higher than they did in the peak of 1989. And I mean, my wife and I bought our first home, our first residence in 1995. And we bought from a woman who had purchased the house 11 years earlier for $42,000, and she was selling it to us for $168,000.
Yeah.
And I remember my father saying, it's gone up 400% in 11 years. That's a bubble if there ever was one. Who's ever going to pay $168,000 for a house in Port Coquitlam? This is ridiculous. You're crazy, kid. I don't know. Well, if you're going to buy it, interest rates were 7.25%, I think, roughly at that time. You better lock in, because it's going right back up over 10%. Interest rates are going up. Property values are going down. That's what I've had drummed into me from all kinds of non-real estate related people every year of my life. And sadly, we did listen on the 5-year fixed, and lo and behold, 18 months later, we were breaking that mortgage. Why were we breaking a mortgage? We were moving to a bigger house. Why wouldn't we have just ported that mortgage over? As it turned out, that bigger house was in the incredibly remote rural area known as Anmore, and the property was on well water. And the bank at the time, rhymes with Bank of Montreal, they said, sorry, we don't like that the property's on well water. We're not willing to port your mortgage. You have to break this mortgage and go somewhere else. And we paid I think it was $6,800 penalty on a $160,000 mortgage. It was over 4% of the balance. And it was, we'd put 5% down on that house. Yeah. The penalty was almost the entire down payment. Almost our entire life savings was being vacuumed back out of our hands. So,
well, certainly the factor that you did buy, and that you did buy investment properties, means that you, as a broker, you understand what everybody goes through. I used to, as a realtor, have a little, I call it the first time buyer first aid kit. And I said, because on the way home you think, what do we do? Did the house have a double garage or single garage? And so in the middle of the night you open the kit and there's aspirin and there's a motivational book and all this kind of stuff, because it's normal, right? It's a big investment. Yesterday at the speech I made, I showed the opening slide and showed headlines of the past, and one of them was, realtors are prowling like hungry tigers. The house prices will never go higher, and the price was $54,000, and then I flipped the page and it said 1974. So as far back as 1974, there were the naysayers. I call them naysayers with fervor because they seem to grow in the winter, Yeah. And so when we look around, of course, we have a real estate bent, but we have seen so many people create a life, and create a betterment of themselves by taking that leap and being a little apprehensive. It's almost a requirement that you be a little apprehensive before you sign on the dotted line. Now you have reinvented yourself, and now you are sort of the trainer, the man that trains them all, and I'm sure that we will see even another invention of you in the future.
Well, we'll see. It may be a corporate role yet. That's playing out as we speak. So we'll see where.
One
it
of
all
the
goes.
things I love in life is this growing into our own future best. Right? There's so many different versions. I think personally, I still have at least another 10 reinvention for Ozzie. You, of course, being a lot younger, you have probably 20 or 30 reinventions left.
As I say, I've certainly always enjoyed our time together over the last 10 years that I've known you, and you are leading by example. You are constantly reinventing yourself. I think it's phenomenal, and what other way is there to live? We're so blessed to be where we are. Yeah. You really can do whatever you want to do.
No question. And when I look at you and look at your Facebook and look all the actions that you take, both personal in terms of exercising and bicycling and hiking and enjoying life, you do live a life large, which is our motto at OZZIE'S. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom. And anybody that has listened must simply go to your website.
I appreciate that.
DustanWoodhouse.com, or is it Dustan Woodhouse?
I got them both. .com and .ca.
That's DUSTAN Woodhouse.com. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.